Welcome to the All Ambient podcast, where we dig into the creative process, hear untold stories, and explore the brilliant minds behind some of the finest ambient music out there. I'm your host, Mike Graff. I'm excited to be in this together with you. Let's get going. Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the All Ambient Roundtable. I am joined again by Kirk Smith, Marshall Usinger, and Ben Tatlow. We are going to dig into the world of playlists, which aren't going anywhere. They are certainly a part of the world of music. And as an artist, composer, producer, musician, there are a lot of great things that come with the world of playlisting. There are some not so great things, and there are some really unfortunate things, but there's just a whole spectrum of things to talk about. And we've probably just scratched the surface on the topic and what we're able to dig into. But nevertheless, we get into some great stuff. I am really grateful for these fellow composers and friends. I love that we get to do this together. I know you're going to enjoy this one. Here we go. Welcome to the All Ambient Roundtable number 2. Hey everybody, welcome to yet another edition of the All Ambient Roundtable. Thrilled to be here with these guys. As always, I am staring at the bright and shiny faces of Ben Tatlow from Antarctic Wastelands, Kirk Smith of We Dream of Eden, Marshall Usinger of Be Still the Earth. Man, it is good to see you guys.
Good to see you too, man.
Good to see you too.
How you guys doing?
Great to be here.
Everybody's all right.
We're doing well. At time of recording, we're almost at Halloween. And I know between all of us, we all have children of trick-or-treating ages. And so, we're gearing up for that. Halloween does double as my wife's birthday as well. My lovely wife's birthday.
Yeah.
So we kind of do Halloween
Love
right
it.
around here. But yeah.
Love it.
That's what we're up to.
October birthdays, dude. That's what's up. It was just my birthday a little bit ago.
That's true.
10 days or so ago.
Happy belated.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How are you?
I know. I can't believe it.
It's
great. I'm a grown up now, so it's been good. Yeah.
Whose kid has the weirdest Halloween costume for this year? Or are we just going with a whole bunch of predictability?
Yeah.
This year's pretty safe. Everything was kind of, we got passed down some hand-me-down things from a friend who actually buys good costumes. Because usually we have to make our own, and they're fairly terrible. But we lucked out. Got some good Donkey Kongs.
Those make for the best photos. A Donkey Kong.
Yeah, we get full-on Donkey Kong suit.
No, I think I'm supposed to get a grown-up Buzz Lightyear because Eli's got
the
Woody thing going on, and then we've got another
perfect.
little Paw Patrol situation going on too. So And then I was going to have to get a Marshall costume too. If you watch any Paw Patrol, you know that Marshall's in Paw Patrol. But I think
Marshall, that's
Buzz,
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Man, we are so aging ourselves.
Few dads. It's okay.
It's nonstop. Ben, are you guys doing anything?
We are. Theo is he's at school right now in pirate costume, and then I think that will also be
Love it
on whenever it is in a few days' time.
Yep.
Ethan's a bit too small, but there was discussion at one point about having Theo as a dinosaur and then a dinosaur egg with his.
That's a good one.
But I don't think that actually ended up happening. So
there you go.
We'll see. I think I have some role somewhere, and again, I'm not 100% sure what that entails yet.
That's awesome. Amelia and Kate are actually going to be Lilo and Stitch this year, which is going to be cute. So that'll be fun. And my boys, we play a lot of card games around our house. Board games, card games, all the fun stuff. And our two big card games right now are Monopoly Deal and
classic.
Yes, and Exploding Kittens is another big one around here. And so Brayden, my 8-year-old, is going as Mr. Moneybags this year.
Nice.
Monopoly Deal, all that fun stuff. And Ryland is going as an exploding kitten. So he's dressing in all black, and he's got some like cat ears, and we wrapped a half pool noodle with a bunch of red duct tape and like turned it into a stick of dynamite. So he is an exploding kitten.
Wow.
That's perfect.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
It's perfect. See what you did there?
Oh,
yes.
Where's the dad joke button?
It's
dad
like,
joke.
yeah.
Activated.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Dad jokes are my favorite.
That's amazing.
You're welcome.
Well, we're in that season of, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but I'm up here in the bitter, cold, bold north where, I mean, we literally have, and I'm not trying to be that guy, but like there's snow in the forecast for Minnesota right now. Like it won't stay, but like it starts to show up. We're in October. We're recording this at late October and it's already around here. But that being said, this season, kind of the stretch of when it gets really cold for us, in this hemisphere, winds up being a really productive time for me because, I mean, we're basically hibernating, right? At some points it's just so bitter outside that's like, well, shoot. No, it's not only that you can't really go anywhere, but it's kind of, and I've talked about this before, but back in COVID, when the world was shut down and nobody really was keeping track of anybody, we were all just, nobody really knew what was going on. And then of all people, Taylor Swift comes out of nowhere and shows up with multiple albums that are just so well done. I mean, like everything that came from the sessions that she was doing and it was Folklore, and I forget the name of the second one, but all the stuff that she did with, not just with Jack, but with Aaron from The National, then Justin from Bon Iver. And I loved it. But secondly, I was like, man, I just started thinking about it. I think it clearly is some of her best stuff in a long time, kind of in that lane. And I know that her pop stuff is cool too and everything. But I was thinking about it and I was like, I kind of feel like this turned out even better than it would have if it was just an everyday, like, oh, hey, I'm going to go to the studio for a few hours and then I've got this photo shoot thing and I go be at this thing and I'm doing dinner here. Like no one knew where she was. She was just out in the middle of nowhere, not really being bothered. And she just got to marinate in what she was working on. And so I equate that to like getting the chance to hide for a while and not be, you don't really have too many people looking for you because it's just awful outside. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to get some really cool work done. I'm just going to dig my head in and go for it. So yeah, so that's a season coming for me. I don't know what the rhythm looks like for you guys. And I know some people kind of feel the opposite, where when the holidays start showing up, life just gets kind of busy with that and they sort of put things on hold, which rightfully so is a cool thing. But what does your guys' end of year, beginning of new year rhythm look like for all the stuff you're doing?
I feel like it's always like a really busy time for me in general, even like over the years of being self-employed and all that. It feels like towards the end of the year, there's just always like multiple projects that feels like I'm juggling. And then once January comes around, there's always been like some relief, and it's like a really slow time, I think, just in general, because of people like us and working people taking holiday time off and that sort of thing. So my experience has been, even though there is like some of that hunker down, but I feel like for me, it's because things kind of get busy. And then once holiday time rolls around, I try to actually take a little bit of time off, even though I'm not great at that either. And then once, it's kind of like, just feels a little bit stressful up until then, but maybe it will be different this year. I'm going to try at least to not be too stressed, but that's kind of like, it's how it goes for me. It's always busy towards the end.
There you go. How about you guys?
Yeah. I mean, there's that thing where you're racing towards that week before Thanksgiving starts. For me, it's like, how much can I get done by then so that I'm as least amount of stress as possible going into then. And then I have like a little reprieve for 10 days before Christmas starts to kick into high gear. So it's like I have that week and a half after Thanksgiving to maybe bunker down and knock a few things out. And so it's like you're always racing to be as productive as possible so that you can try to enjoy those moments. And then you're in the moment, you're like, okay, I'm here. And then it kind of builds up another layer of productivity post holidays, So it's like as soon as after the first week of January, then you're like, I feel like I get so much done after the first week of January just because I'm just like, I'm itching to get in and knock some stuff out.
Yeah.
And like, sometimes I succeed in being in the moments of the holidays and sometimes I don't succeed. But it does feel like the deadline of the holidays is actually very helpful for me because it makes me say like, okay, like I need to get these things done or else they're going to sit undone for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I like to come into the year with a blank slate of like new things to work on instead of things that I haven't finished,
Nice. Yeah.
Which isn't always the case, but
yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I'm always trying to use this season to get as much ahead as I can into like the next year. Because here in Hong Kong, we have Lunar New Year. which usually falls kind of around the end of Jan, early Feb, which is like a big holiday. A lot of things shut down, schools are off, all the rest of it. So January kind of till, early mid-Feb are really bitty. So I'm like, all right, okay, I basically need to get Q1 sorted before the end of the calendar year. And then it's like, oh, okay, then you find your rhythm in the new year and, work on things a little bit further out. But yeah, it's similar to what you guys are saying for sure.
Yeah. Well, here's to a productive Q4. Wow,
Q4.
That sounds so not creative and all that. But hey,
but it's a season.
Yes. Productive late fall and early winter to all. I'm just so glad that we're doing this, you guys. Like, I feel like the more and more we do this, the more we're going to unpack stuff together. And I think things are going to get just even deeper and deeper. But even just on the onset of being able to see each other's faces, and I don't know, man, like it is in a world where it is so easy to feel like you're connecting with a bunch of people on social and whatever. And yet you just feel so alone. I love making time for being with people and being with people who, like the like heart, like mind, and people that you walk away from it. You're like, oh, I'm so glad we spent time together. I feel you're just filled up on the other end of that conversation and that time together. So this is just such a great thing. I'm really glad we're doing this.
Me too, man. It's good. Like, I don't know, I feel like in the seasons of life of having the kids, and it's hard, you guys know, like if you're like me, it's hard to make even the time to do things like socially during the week and get outside of your house or studio and be social with people and remember that like other people exist and that whole thing. So stuff like this to do, we've all been fortunate enough to meet people from like all over the world doing music, which is incredible. And so, to be able to connect like even like this somewhat regularly, is really cool, I think too.
Okay, guys. Well, we got some stuff to talk about today, but before we begin cracking open that nut, I saw something just today that I thought was kind of interesting and wanted to pick your guys' brain on it, but just saw that Spotify mentioned some royalty changes that are coming down.
I just saw that too.
Yeah. Which I've got my own thoughts about it, but I want to shut up and hear what you guys have to say, which for anyone who is not in the know, especially by the time this episode airs, the overarching thing, and I might be missing something, but the overarching thing is that Spotify is going to start cracking down on streaming fraud, which is great, because in as much as you want to have as many people streaming your stuff as possible, there's also the hacking of the system, which it just kind of makes everybody look bad at that point. So I'm glad that they're going after that. But the royalty changes, it looks as though Spotify is kind of adopting a payout structure similar to, there's like a gate threshold, if you will, kind of like what YouTube does with its creators. With YouTube, it's like, hey, you need this many followers, this many minutes watched, and then you can start actually earning revenue on your videos. Looks like Spotify is kind of saying the same thing as far as you need to earn X number of, I think it's small. I think it's like just a few cents, but like you need to earn X number of cents before your royalties register at all. And again, I've got thoughts, but I am curious what you guys think of the idea that you have to like bust through, and again, a low ceiling, but like bust through a ceiling before Spotify starts paying out. Are you guys just like, I don't know, whatever? Or is there more thought to it than that?
It's an interesting, I literally just saw it like before we jumped on this, and I was watching it. I was like, this is interesting. And people hate on Spotify and all the things, and you can go down that rabbit trail. But in my mind, what they've done is pretty amazing in the era that they did it for, creating a platform to people even like paying anything for music. At one point it became free, and there's a point at which you have to understand it's like they're trying to be sustainable. They're trying to create a profit, and people are like, well, all the executives have all the money and da-da-da. Mm-hmm. And so you could see it from their point because of the amount, just the sheer amount of files that are being added. It's like, is it 3 million a month? It's like something, it's like 3 million a month. And so you think of
50 to 70,000 a day or something like that.
The infrastructure that it takes to maintain that amount of stuff is pretty significant. And the idea that these micro transactions are having to be paid out over, millions and millions and millions of songs. It's like, okay, if we can put in a small and reasonable infrastructure that offsets the cost of the amount of things that are being uploaded, then maybe this could be something that is sustainable, because it's almost like they created this opportunity for people to put music up, and then the distributors made it almost free to put the music up. So the barrier to entry is zero. And then all of a sudden Spotify's having to hold the costs of this free barrier to entry and now pay out on all these micro things that are being listened to once or twice. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe if we do something. So there's part of me that's like, okay, I kind of get that. As long as the actual royalty payment doesn't change and become like YouTube's, then now we got problems, because YouTube's payout is pretty terrible compared to Spotify.
Yeah, totally. I don't think the royalty rates are changing at all.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that will probably happen for those who are earning royalties is that we'll probably see a bump in the sense that there will be a lot of those like tiny microtransactions that will just never pay out. But again, like you said, like if you think about tracks that are earning 3 or 4 cents, but then you think about the 3 million like new tracks that show up each month, in whatever article I read, it would just kind of estimate it. But like there's probably tens of millions of dollars in royalties, with all those billions of microtransactions that will, ultimately with this new gate system, like they will then be paid into the, and I don't know all the details of how they plan on splitting that, but I don't think that many of our songs, from staring at the 3 guys right here, I don't think any of our stuff is going to not pay out, if you will. But I am interested in what that might mean for that big black box lump sum that'll be interesting. But anyway.
Yeah, I think it's all wrapped into, Spotify, you probably also saw, just posted a profit for, I don't know if it's the first time in a few years or if it's even for a very long time. So it's part of their kind of streamlining process of getting everything, just in a place that can drive a profit for the business.
Right.
Some of what they do in that is a little bit, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but, obviously they're pushing podcasts. They're pushing, non-music, non-royalty paying out products on their service. And so, this
which
is
we might be talking about a little bit further in this conversation. But
I'll hold on that. But I will say this. I think there's, alongside this announcement, they also said they're going to be cracking down, and this is a good thing, on fraudulent streams. But I'll be really interested. At the moment, they're saying that like labels and distributors could potentially get penalized. They already do this. They already threaten distributors with, and labels are like, hey, we're going to take all your music down if you've got all these fraudulent streams. And I have absolutely no issue with them trying to prevent fraud on their site. In fact, I'm fully on board with that. But the way they've gone about it thus far has been quite problematic because they have threatened artists, labels, and distributors for fraudulent streams, which in many cases they haven't generated at all. I'm sure, in fact, I know that all of you have had the same issue that I have, which is a track of yours just lands in a playlist, which you haven't added. You have never asked for it to land in this playlist, which suddenly gets a bunch of bot traffic on it. And then, every month I get an email from our distributor saying, hey, here's a list of all of your fake streams. And I'm like, okay, fine, but I haven't generated any of this. And they know that, and it's a very small percentage of our total, and so that's fine. But I would hate to think that they're going to ramp up that kind of policing of the site and actually blame artists and distributors and labels versus saying, hey, this playlist just needs to be deleted because it's generating all of these fake streams, or this artist has 90% of its streams is fake. Okay, they must be doing something. We're going to get rid of that. So I'll be really interested to see how that kind of marries with this, hey, you need to get X amount of streams to even get paid out. Because for me, that also a little bit incentivizes, hey, if you're a small artist just starting out and you're like, I want to be paid, even if it's just $5, $10, you might be very tempted to spend that to get a bunch of fake streams so that you reach that low barrier to entry for the Spotify kind of revenue model. So we'll see how things pan out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and Marshall, I want to hear what you have to say. And my God, just on that last point, like I want to be optimistic about it. Like I want to believe that if there's a barrier to payout or whatever, that the artists would, instead of their initial gut being like, how do I game this? How do I get some fraudulent streams going? But rather like, okay, let's get this hustle on. Let's, let me get out there. Let me start making connections. Let me see if there's some stuff within, even just within Submit Hub or just starting to just spin the wheels a little bit and get it going. Like, I think maybe that means that people who would have just launched it and forgotten about it are actually going to take it a little more seriously. So that's me being optimistic on that end.
I like the optimistic take.
Yeah,
trying.
It's good.
Trying. But also, like, thinking that there really is an interesting point about what's already being done to identify fraudulent streams and who's responsible for that. It will be really interesting because the last thing that I'm sure Spotify would want is for them, or, any DSP or whatever, to start getting the reputation of, we believe everyone is guilty until they prove themselves innocent, sort of thing. Like, let me just point the finger at you and this is your problem and figure it out. Like, I think that there's got to be some sort of symbiotic answer that is helpful for everybody because, Spotify wants to, I know it's profit driven in the sense that they don't want to pay out streams that are fraudulently earned. But at the same time, like, I also don't want Spotify to pay out to fraudulent streams, right? Because then that just mucks up the whole system. So what can we do as artists or as labels or on this end of the distro to help that or to help combat it? It'll be interesting. Yeah. Marshall, you got any even more brilliant thoughts?
No, but I think it's hard for me to be optimistic about it just in the sense of what's going on in the industry in general. And that's been the trend of just these companies wanting to make a profit, which is understandable. But I don't know. Did you guys catch the news on like what was going on with Bandcamp too? I don't know. That was a week or so ago. Bandcamp's, getting bought up and people getting laid off. And so all of these things to me is, just what makes it hard to be like, oh yeah, things are looking up or whatnot. But I agree with what you said, Kirk, just about the fact that like we can upload our music and that we're earning royalties. It is amazing. And I also am just kind of like the trend of, some of us I know here who got into licensing a long time ago, like we made a decent amount of money. And as time goes on, it's just like dwindle, going down, being paid less and less, however we can be. So I don't know. I would imagine that Spotify at least is hopefully not like trying to find a way like, hey, how can we pay, artists even less than we do? Maybe any optimism I have is like what you guys said, basically, to where it's like, okay, there's music that, is just not going to get in the door because it's not going to pass this threshold. Like that would be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think let's see. I think on the note too of like, I know it's been going on in our world of like the ambient music. Like, I don't know if you guys have been seeing like all of these profiles that look like they're from one artist or one person where, right. The profile photos are like all the same and they have like an artist name and it's in the same text and it's just this massive amount of these profiles like popping up. And I noticed a week or two ago that like my similar artists like used to be all you guys and all guys within our circle and they're just completely different. I have like all these names on my similar artists that I've like never seen or heard of before. And I just thought that was really peculiar on, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to like guess, or I don't know if you guys have any insight on that as to what might be happening, but I know that I've seen like kind of these playlists starting to pop up where, you can clearly tell it's one or two people like just overpopulating things. Sure. And so, I'm like, if there's any...
And do you think that they're overpopulating with their own music and they're just being extremely prolific?
Right.
Or is this an AI game and they're just generating a bunch of stuff and chucking it out?
Right. I mean, and I haven't
doing that, or
I mean, would love to know. Great question. I would doubt that they're just like churning out soundscapes 24/7 because I mean, there's a lot. Like there's, some of these profiles. There's just a ton of different artist names and stuff. And that's hard to say, right? Like it's hard to say that you could monitor what comes through in that sense. But there's just these little different trends I've been noticing, and it's kind of interesting to see it happening within the context of the conversation, in general.
Yeah, I think it's good that Spotify is, clearly trying to react to exactly what you're talking about, Marshall, which is this kind of proliferation of this kind of really very generic backgroundy music. I know that I just scrolled through one of these news articles and it said that One of the things they're looking to do is to enforce a minimum playtime on the non-music stuff. So especially like
nature
the forest
stuff and
sounds or the white noise stuff. Yeah. And I think that's all good stuff. But I think there's a fundamental issue with the whole setup, which is that it ultimately incentivizes and encourages people to write a lot of music, put it into a playlist, get people to listen to that playlist, fake or not, and churn out, you can essentially work out what an ROI would be off the back of that. And, whether you do it legit, like having Instagram ads pointing to the playlist and just, stuff it full of short tracks that you own 100% of, if it's in a slightly more nefarious way, like it incentivizes that. And until I think Spotify moved to a completely different model, I know Tidal have a slightly different model. SoundCloud look to go do these kind of fan-powered royalties. There are lots of ways one could structure it, but where it really rewards the artists who have actual fans actually choosing to listen to their music, even if that would mean that for some of us, we would lose out because obviously we've got, lots of playlists that we're in that are more backgroundy. I think that's the only way that you incentivize real artists and, fans to know that, hey, if I'm spending $10, $15 a month on Spotify, that it goes to the people who I am choosing to listen to. And I feel like that's the only way they can kind of get out of this incentivization of this type of music.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I am further fascinated that we've already begun onto some of our main point of topics, and you guys don't even know what the main topic is yet, but we're going there already, which is crazy. So we'll touch on that in a minute. And, to your point, Ben, I personally think maybe I'm optimistic to a fault with that stuff, but like I get all the like, hey, let me game this release, where it's got a whole bunch of like 31-second tracks.
Oh yeah.
Or let me try to stuff this. I understand the concept of it, but at the end of the day, man, like I just want to make good music, right? Like my goal is for what I put out there to not be this like, I have won. Look at the streams that have amassed because of my cunning ingenuity. Like, man, like I want the music to be supported and it's doing well and I'm grateful for that. But like, I want to have it happen because of good music, right? Like because of music that I am proud to put out there, music that I've spent my time on and doing that and not in a way that refuses to budge from yesterday's practices while, tomorrow keeps evolving, but more so like, let's keep growing. Yes. But let's do it within the context of like making great stuff. So I got to keep coming back to that plumb line for myself.
Well, I'm going to make a bunch of 30-second tracks, Mike. And what are you going to do about it?
31.
You haven't
31 seconds.
Yeah. 31.
Okay.
Yeah. 31, man.
I missed it. So close.
Oh, Be Still the Earth's new 750 track release.
Be still, but just for 30 seconds, and then go about your day.
That's so funny. Well, and as a quick aside, as we keep going, like if you guys catch anything like that's a really good thing for us to just kind of bring to the table. If you guys see anything just kind of in the news world that you want to touch base on, not that we have to go after it for 30 minutes or whatever, but if there's something just over the course of the month, you're like, man, we should probably talk about that. Like, please just earmark those things. And the Bandcamp thing, I didn't forget about it, but I definitely didn't know as much as I wanted to. So yeah, those sorts of things I think are good for all of us, not just to talk about, but just to know, period. Because I don't spend as much time on news as I used to.
Yeah.
So. Well, let's keep on moving. Guys, it is that time of the roundtable. We are going to play What Song? Which means that you need to open up your favorite music player and you need to be willing to completely and transparently share with all of our listeners what is the song that is just waiting for you on your now playing tab in your music player. Who's going?
Why don't you kick it off, Mike?
Oh,
yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I shall. I'm going to stumble through this only because I do not know how to properly pronounce Icelandic. But open Spotify. But no, I've been listening to Sigur Rós' newish album Atta. Is that anyone want to correct me?
I don't know. I didn't know they even had
no.
new.
I mean that's what I would say, cool. Mike. But yeah, fantastic album.
So I hope someone doesn't hunt me down for this, but I only recently started really listening to Sigur Rós. Like I've appreciated them for a really long time, but I know there are so many guys and girls on the music scene, certainly in our lane, kind of in the ambient or cinematic or, soundscapey thing, who looks at them as sort of the prophet of the whole group. These are the pioneers. These are the ones who, set the trail before us. And I've always liked them, but I never did this like crazy deep dive into them or we're listening to albums from start to finish. So I'm kind of late to the party. But that being said, this new release is one that not only have I listened to start to finish multiple times, but I love every bit of it. And there's also, like, as I get older, it's really cool to me. I mean, these guys have been doing their thing for almost, 30 years now. And for them to be crushing it at the level that they are, I'm like, man, there's hope for me when I'm in my mid 50s, when I'm in my 60s. Like I don't want to even come close to peaking yet. You know what I mean? Like let's go. And so the track, I've been listening to that, and the track More, which again, I'm probably saying it wrong, but on the Ata album by Sigur Rós, just the whole album start to finish is incredible. So I'm halfway in the middle of listening through it.
Dude, the closing track on that album, I think it's 8. I mean, the whole album, is amazing. But yeah, if any of you haven't listened, make sure you hit that closing.
No, I didn't even know they came out with a new record.
Track. It's so good.
Yeah,
we're
worth the listen for sure.
Hopopolia was the song that my wife walked down the aisle to.
Oh yeah.
So we're
classic.
Like, I'm big fan.
That's amazing.
Icelandic for jumping in puddles.
Love it. That's a great song.
Fun fact, that Jonsi sings in his own like Hopelandic, where he's just kind of like whatever syllables he hits. I'm not like attempting to take a page out of that book, but there's been a couple songs where I've needed like some vocal stuff recently that I've been working on. And I usually try to like just throw some little phrase together or whatever. And this time I was like, nah.
Yeah.
Whatever random syllables happen to hit. And it turned out really cool.
Nice.
I was really happy with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mike's singing gibberish. It's great. Thanks, Jonsi. Thanks for modeling that well. Okay, who's going next?
I'll go.
I can. Oh, sorry. Do you want to
Should
go?
I?
You want to go, Marshall?
Yeah, I'll go.
Rock, paper, scissors.
No. I got this.
Right.
Actually, this is still in my Spotify, Michael, because I sent you these dudes the other day, and I've been listening to this band called Holy Fawn a lot. Holy Fawn is cool. It's very heavy, but they like have this, I don't know, I don't want to say post-rock, but they have like this very like heavy cinematic vibe about them, even though it's like really, really heavy guitars. But I've seen them a couple times, but I saw them open for Thrice a couple months ago. And then I've just been listening to them to a lot since then. But they have a new album, newish, 2022, that came out called Dimensional Bleed. And I have it on this track. The track is called Void of Light. It's later in the album. But yeah, it's a great album. If you like This Will Destroy You and heavier post-rock stuff like that, I would recommend checking out Holy Fawn. Yeah, quite nice.
Amazing. Who's next? We haven't gotten anything like flat out embarrassing.
I actually, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've got
so
my...
polite. Everyone's so polite. Man.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got my 31 second nature noise. just loaded up there. Just ready to go.
Enchanted Forest.
Enchanted Forest exactly. No, I have a lovely album by someone called Amparo, who you may have come across on Instagram, actually. She's got quite a large following. I think she does a lot of visual, kind of audio-visual stuff. The visuals are always amazing. I think I read somewhere, and I might be wrong, so apologies if I am wrong about this, but I think it has been like Grammy nominated in like the New Age category.
Nice.
Right on.
Which is really, really cool. But it's when I say New Age, it's not New Age at all. It's kind of like organic, alternative, ambient with like drums and kind of, there's quite a bit of like spoken word but affected, and it's a really cool listen. She's not someone who I've listened to a whole lot, but yeah, it kind of showed up for me on Spotify. I listened through to the album. It's really, really great. So I check it out. The track's called On My Mind. The album's called Day and Night by Amparo. Yeah, really, really, really cool. Definitely worth checking out.
Awesome. Kirk?
Yes, I feel like this one's, it's a little bit cooler than my last one. Although, I mean, it was cool, the last guy.
No, your last one was strong, man.
Yeah. This is Yebba, Yebba.
Okay.
And I just realized today her name is Abby. which is just Abby backwards, is Yebba. And she's either close to Memphis where I'm at, or I think she might be from like Arkansas, which is right across the river. But she has an amazing voice. Like if you listen to her voice, and in fact, if you listen to, because I was listening to, Jacob Collier does those "I Harm You," where he would take like a clip of somebody singing on their phone, and then there's a clip of Yebba singing like a 30-second version of "Bridge Over Troubled Waters," and he's doing the harmonies of it, and it's like I would watch it on repeat. And I would get chills every single time. It just doesn't even matter how many times. But her voice it's so soulful and so authentic and so wonderful. And so I was just listening to some of her music today. I think the song that I have up is called Evergreen. But I just could listen to her sing a cappella pretty much all day long, and it would be
amazing
with no music necessary, like no backing track necessary. Yeah. Wow. Yebba. And I was like, that's a really funny name. And then I looked her up and I was like, oh, her name's Abby. And I was like, oh, she just did it backwards. I was like, that's genius. The best name ever. Yeah.
Her profile, whatever, the about section, all it says is somewhere between young, wild, and free and an anxiety attack. I kind of love that. It's awesome.
That's great.
Aren't we all? Oh man, it's true. Love it. If for nothing else, like we're getting some great music recommends.
Well, and I just thought of this too.
Yeah.
Mike, we could probably put this stuff in the show notes.
100%.
I know it might be more work, but maybe it's easy enough to do.
Oh man, it'd be super fun. If we exist for no other reason but to give people a couple recommendations once every however often these episodes come out, like man.
We all need that.
If you got to be known for something, I mean, hey, it happens.
I need that, man. Like I have a buddy of mine who he's like my ears on the ground, because I get lost and he's like, hey, check out this band, check this out. Like we all need those people. And, and it's nice if we are those people. It's always nice to be like, hey, I found this thing that people don't know about yet, and it's beautiful, Yeah. Something really amazing about that.
I have a buddy like that in Knoxville who's my ears on the ground for sure. And yeah, it's fun to have someone who's like way more into like the vinyl crawling and all that stuff where I'm just like, man, you got to help me. I don't have time to dig for all that stuff. But I remember we met in 2009, which I remember specifically because it's the year I got married, and he started dating my wife's best friend like right then, and then they got married shortly after, which is great. But he turned me on to the American Dollar back then, which was super cool. And then I think I think at least a couple of us did, but when they just put out a rework album and had a few people do some remixes for them, I got to join that group and remix Once Before You Go. I just posted about it like a normal, like, hey, I released some music. And the guy who turned me on to the American Dollar like 14 years ago was like, wait, and just kind of like, it was this full circle kind of cool moment for him. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So he'll be my feeder project for quite a while, I'm sure. Well, hey guys, we are going to get to the main topic, but before we do that, I want to just take a quick moment and open the mailbag. And it's funny because right now, at time of recording, we still have yet to even air a single episode of the All Ambient Roundtable. So no one knows that the mailbag exists yet, but we do, in fact, have an All Ambient podcast mailbag. You can email podcast@all-ambient.com and ask us whatever questions you got. It can be for anyone in particular. It can be a silly question. It can be something that you've been wondering about in the creative world, in the music world, in the production, releasing, all, kind of all that stuff. We are completely open to hearing what you folks have to say, so do not hesitate. You can write in questions to podcast@all-ambient.com, and we'll be happy to open up that mailbag and chew over whatever comes our way. Cool. So main topic at hand, and we've already discussed a little bit, so we don't have to tread ground that we've already gone after, but I did want to talk about the overarching subject of playlists. And the idea, like, I want to be kind of preemptive about this because I have heard a lot of podcasts talk about this stuff from a real pessimistic perspective. Like, ultimately, it feels like that people believe that ultimately it is a game that you cannot win. And I, for one, just simply refuse to believe that. I've seen wins over the years, and it's been a modest and gradual growth. It's been growth, but it's not like boom, like there's the thing, but slow and steady wins the race. I'm really grateful for everything that has turned into a real win, both in terms of financially keeping my electricity on, but also in terms of the reach of the people and the listeners that are showing up. So while we might touch on some of the same topics that have been talked about there out in the world and that, have had podcasts on before, like I, for one, believe there is something within the world of playlists that can be done well and can be done well by anybody and everybody that wants to go for it. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game where, you have to fight for whatever sliver of the pie. Like, I think it's going to continue to grow. And that's so. All that to say, that's what I believe, and that's where I'm going to operate this part of the conversation from is that heart of not super cynical, but just like, man, there's opportunity out there for sure. So anyway, we're going to talk about playlists, and the little thoughts that I scribbled down were I wanted to talk about the good, I want to talk about the bad, and I want to talk about the ugly. We'll kind of guide through those as we go, but the good, like I want to talk about the value of the exposure that shows up from playlists, which I think is really cool to reach a whole bunch of people that you may never have reached before. A lot of really cool stuff there. The bad and the ugly, I guess, are, it's kind of a blurry line. But as far as the bad goes, I wanted to talk about it. And we talked a little bit about this last time, but the artistic crisis of the line of writing specifically for playlists versus writing something that resonates with my heart. And what does the balance of that tightrope look like? And then, also in that is probably the conversation of fans versus listeners that we already talked about a little bit. The idea there are people, for all of us, there are a lot of people who listen to our music, but have no idea who we are, have no idea that we even exist, probably would barely even be able to remember a moniker name of anybody's, but they've heard our music plenty, which is crazy. So there are a lot of listeners, but the ability to engage with them is far less tangible than those who are, quote, actual fans of our music and follow to a much greater degree. So that's a tough line. And then the ugly, there's, man, and I'm sure there's plenty more that we could talk about. Maybe this is going to be a 2 or 3 parter. I don't know, because we all have to go to sleep at some point. Besides Ben, who has to tackle the rest of his day. But the ugly, like I know that there's a politics side to playlisting, and, we could get into some of the deep weeds on what feels like the equivalent of payola for songs showing up on playlists. I think maybe the part that I find most interesting in the ugly column right now is seeing playlists be loaded with essentially what is a lot of first party material, like a lot of material, like in Spotify's world, like material that they are hiring people within their own sort of ecosystem to create and to push that proprietarily as, like, hey, listen to this stuff. And, by way of giving them a lot of traction, or these monikers that they've created out of thin air. But at the perhaps, and I know I just said, I don't believe in scarcity mentality. I believe in abundance mentality. But in that particular instance, it's interesting, especially some of the biggest playlists in our genre types, that there seems to be quite a bit of that sort of thing happening. So yeah, lot to talk about. I don't have any particular way to go about it, but I would just off the cuff, I'm just curious, when you guys just sit down with a cup of coffee all by yourself and you're thinking about the world of playlists and all that, like what is one of the first situations in the playlist world that comes to mind and that you've formed some thoughts about? That's a really general way of saying, how do you guys feel about the whole situation?
I think one thing that perhaps goes under the radar a little bit is just the amount of editorial playlists that now exist for such a wide range of kind of niches. So if we go back 5 years, even 10 years, it was actually relatively straightforward and easy to build up your own playlists. Say, I still run a playlist called Study, Focus, Concentrate. Mm-hmm. Very generic, but it got a lot of traction in a quite straightforward way, purely by the fact that it, from a search perspective, it had the words people were looking for. You filtered to the top, people followed it, it was a good playlist, et cetera, et cetera. It built up. And so that was an opportunity to promote my own music, but also music from other people on the label, etc., etc. Right now, with Spotify and other platforms, of course, basically covering all those bases. So, you've got ambient study, ambient relaxation, ambient concentration, focus this, it's every keyword that could be taken has been taken by editorial playlists. That it's so hard to build up your own playlists to support yourself in an organic way, which has this kind of duality. One is that you are even more reliant on editorial placements, which are very hard to get with the amount of, essentially, as you put in, Mike, first party tracks in there. And then the artist curated or independently curated playlists that do filter to the top are so competitive to get into, and typically have got a large marketing budget behind them to push them to the top. So, most, as I referenced earlier, people putting a lot of money into Instagram ads to push their own playlists, which of course incentivizes those playlists to be only featuring tracks that the curator kind of owns or owns a large percentage of. Mm-hmm. So for an independent artist who doesn't necessarily have a large budget to put behind growing their own playlists, they're in a little bit of a tricky situation. Sure, you can go to Submit Hub and potentially get into a few, and I think that's definitely a good first step. But versus 5-10 years ago, it is really, really tough to get, when you're starting out, to get out into those ecosystems. Once you've got an established base, I think it's a little bit easier. The editorial team do take more note of things, and maybe you've got some ways of getting in with other curators. But when you're starting out, it's now a really tough situation, which, again, not to bring it too negative, but it incentivizes the fake stuff, I think, for many people who look for shortcuts, potentially.
Thoughts, responses?
I think it's kind of crazy how it feels like it's changed, I don't know, pretty quickly, or just like overpopulated really quickly, especially over the past couple years with like all the different genres of ambient playlists as a really good example. But I mean, across every genre. For me, like when I connected with all of you guys, and I think that was like early 2020, and I had been, releasing my own music for a little bit, but didn't have a super huge amount of traction by any means on Spotify. And even just meeting you guys and meeting some other people, in all the same people that we all know, like that was like a big game changer for me, just as far as being able to get some, not only like more exposure, but just meeting other people who were like very supportive of each other, and whether it like be just in the sense of, we know some guys who make playlists and we put, each other's music on our playlist if it's a good fit. And so kind of being able to connect in that way and just getting to know other people doing this, that was really cool. And it was something that at that time for me, helped me just get to kind of a next level, I guess, just as far as like being able to have a bit of a wider audience. It feels like now, though, like if I was to be in that same spot and it's only 3 years later, that would probably look very different than it did just a couple years ago. So as far as looking at playlists from, I think you said, Mike, like just from the perspective of the good or what's been good about them, was a huge encouragement to me, just making and releasing my own music, which was, completely independent at the time. And I think it also helped like maybe shift my view a little bit as far as feeling like you needed when I say record label, I mean in the sense of feeling like you needed a record label that like had a huge budget and was going to, do a ton of stuff to push your music kind of thing. Like, we all have these labels that we work with, but they are in more of like it's like a partnership, which is more than just feels like transactional. So for me, it kind of shifted my lens. I think that we didn't necessarily need to have a bunch of money being thrown and doing like, you have to do, these certain things to get exposure, when it could really be built more on what felt like more of like a community aspect, and just how you guys and the people that I met were running them. And even some of the people within like Submit Hub that I met that way and that sort of thing. So that was a really amazing time for me, just to feel not only like just getting the more exposure to the music, but also meeting and networking and connecting with more people across that platform. So I loved that at that time.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than just how many numbers are showing up on my grid, my my streams, my monthly listeners. All there's so much more to it. Kirk, how about you, man?
Yeah, I'm taking it all in. I mean, playlists, the whole kind of networking and playlists was a game changer for my whole life, and so I love it. And the fact that you could just like message somebody and like say, hey, I made this thing, and I think you would like it. Check it out. And that only makes sense if you did your research, meaning you listen to the playlist and what you have actually is a fit, you know, then you're being considerate with your pitch to say, hey, this might be a fit. It might not, you know, but from my due diligence of listening, I think it could be. And if it's not, or you don't have room or whatever, it's like, okay, no harm, no foul, you know? And so that ability to do that is unprecedented. And it's definitely changed over the years, but I still, at the heart of it, like when you said, if it's a fit, Marshall, that was like, that's a big deal, you know? And so I think that idea that you could do that is amazing. And that still exists. And maybe there's more people doing it and they're doing it in different ways and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, as we build relationships and we hear playlists and we hear labels and we hear other people things, it's like, you know what? Like, the stuff I'm making feels like it could go in this direction. So I need to earmark that in my mind and say, when I get ready to promote this, I know who to send it to and who not to send it to. Yeah. You know, and which it's a form of being considerate and not just spamming people because something happened, but it's like, I understand this and I understand that it could be a fit. And so there's a part of that artists are understanding what they're making and then connecting the dots that they can make some traction, which is different than like listening and writing to a playlist. But although I will say also that in this world, like, you know, a lot of times we're making music and we're coming in the next season and we're making another EP or making another album. And there's sometimes I sit down and I'd be like, you know what? Like, I don't know what to make today. So what do I don't know, maybe I think I haven't made any piano-based things in a while, and I like the piano, so I'm going to do that. Or I haven't made any like more meditative drone things, so I'm going to do something like that. There's almost a point where it's like the subsections of ambient, they actually help me in a way to be like, there's so many options that I could do right now, and I need to just pick something and make something. To where it's actually helpful, to where I can be diverse in what I'm doing on a project so that when and if the time comes, I have different places I can pitch it to. So I don't think we should specifically just write for this and write for that. I think you need to write what resonates with you and what you're excited about, because it's not sustainable if you're not making things that you actually enjoy making. You know, you're just going to give up because you're going to make the same thing 1,000 times and pitch it to people, and it's probably not going to be a fit most of the times. Yeah. And then you're just going to get burnt out. But if you're trying to think of it as a way to be considerate and to springboard your own creativity, then it's relationship building, and things might land and they might not. But you're not necessarily banking on it. You're just kind of still trying to make the stuff you want to make. Yeah. So there's a part of it that I still really like it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think for me, I think a part of what helps catalyze that, or, you know, take that a step further, Kirk, is the idea. Like, I got to keep reminding myself, like, in as much as I love creating and I love what I do, just making all the music, like at some point I need to admit to myself that I do not know which songs are going to hit on playlists. Like I really, really, really don't.
No idea.
And I think there's kind of a beauty to that. I mean, I know James Clear it was either on his blog or one of his books, but he talks about the equal odds principle. And it's the idea, I think his sort of stemmed from looking at scientists and doctors who release into medical journals and stuff, in which articles become widely adopted by the medical community, and how there is just no correlation between who released it and which ones actually wound up popping. And for him, what he said at the time, maybe this is dated at this point, but he was like, okay, I write about 10 or 12 blog posts a month. And normally within those 10 or 12, like 8 to 10 of them just kind of disappear into thin air. Like they get, you know, just a couple views, whatever, and off they go. 2 or 3 of them become what I would call just like a standard article. Like the majority of my audience reads it and cool, that's great. And then there's about 1 a month that winds up becoming viral. Like everybody starts sharing it. It's all over the internet and getting it retagged and shared all over the place. And he's like, that's great. Super grateful for that. But if you were to ask me which one of the 12 at the beginning of any month, like I would never be able to tell you. I would have almost a 0%, almost less than what the probability would be, just because, you know, you start getting over analytical about it. But I feel the same way. And sometimes it's surprising how you just even look at different DSPs. Like you look at something in Amazon Music that is doing really, really well. Like there was a surprise from, I think all of us have seen some cool things happen from slow echo releases on Amazon, which is great and beyond just the slow echo releases. But like something will just pop over there, but we'll get almost the opposite amount of traction on a different DSP. And that I'm not frustrated by that. I'm fascinated by it. And I think it is just a reminder that sometimes you just don't know, but like the only way that you're going to find out and keep learning is if you keep showing up. Right. And so like, I want to hold both things. I want to aim at, creating music that a lot of people do resonate with and that is a good fit and things like that. But I also want to hold it loosely enough where it's like, you know what? I think I have an idea of where this might be going. But then again, like someone else might have a very different idea and it might wind up being really good over here in a way that I never thought about and get attached to that. But I want to write well and I want to show up and let that journey become that journey, if you know what I mean.
The Amazon thing is just like
that's good.
Nice reminder that that Spotify is not the end all. And that,
yeah, it's true.
I mean, that's a reminder I think we all need. and I think it is amazing, even in what you said, just as like that there's a track on Amazon of yours that does really well. And maybe it doesn't get any much traction on Spotify. But like to me, the Spotify thing, you have all these things that make it like that dopamine hit kind of thing. You're like hoping to get this like editorial like bloop, and then you feel like your release has failed because you didn't get that. And now my release is terrible because it didn't land on anything. And then, actually like 3 or 4 weeks later, it gets on a huge Amazon playlist, and now you're able to, earn some royalties just based on that. Like to me, that's such an encouraging thing, just as far as like to do what you just said, Mike, and just like making the music that you feel excited about making and want to not be scared that you're not going to get a Spotify playlist, because it's just like there's these other platforms out there. Let's make the music we want to make. Generally, if we try to make something that is going to land on a playlist, like it feels forced, right? Like it feels forced to me. You listen back to it, you're like, that wasn't me that I put myself into trying to make that. I was trying to do something else. And so, it's really cool to see kind of like specifically the conversation of Amazon, I know has been kind of been thrown around a bit recently. I know in our circle as well, which has been really cool to just kind of see like, there's exposure in different ways. And it kind of goes back to just making the music we feel is, who we are as artists. That of course always translates the best, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's no downside to that as well. Like there's definitely downside to trying to write for playlists, which we've all talked about. But if you focus on the music you want to write and you are simultaneously kind of trying as much as possible to bring people along for the ride, building up a fan base, well, that's going to carry you whatever DSP you're focusing on. It's going to, even if one of them just kind of shut down or shifted gears completely, if there are people who want to listen to your music and they care about what you are bringing to the world, then that's a major win. Yeah. And there's really, as I said, no downside to focusing on just writing the best music you can, as you were saying as well, Mike.
Yeah, and I want to transition just a little bit, but just piggybacking off of that idea, like, and I'm sure this is going to be another roundtable episode for sure, but the idea of the fan versus the listener. And there's a part of me that really understands the conversation of like you need the people who show up. You need the people who are like, I'm a true fan. I follow all your stuff. I love what you do. I listen intently, support in all the ways that we ask them to support, which is great. But I am becoming more comfortable with the idea of what it looks like to have kind of a long play relationship, not long play like a track, but like the length of a relationship with someone, or the potential of someone who does listen to Be Still the Earth or Antarctic Wastelands or We Dream of Eden or Dear Gravity on a regular basis, without realizing that they're listening to any of us or any of other, wonderful colleagues and label mates and friends out there. There's something in the back of my head that says, if I'm making good stuff, if I'm making stuff that I resonate with, and it shows up on some playlist, even if it's just a listener playlist, even if it's a editorial that's, maybe not the big editorial, but is a something editorial. If someone listens to it and they aren't hitting the skip button, it's not something that they're like, okay, I'm going through the next one. There is a bit of information somewhere that's being tracked that's saying, hey, this user enjoyed this song. Like they picked the playlist and they did not skip that song. Like and maybe I'm romanticizing it because maybe they never skip anything. But I do know that there's got to be some data points somewhere where someone who is taking conscious choice of what I'm listening to, what I'm not listening to, and they are actively not skipping through the stuff that we create. Like then for the algorithms and all that to understand that and to compute it into the place of, hey, I'm going to put more of this in front of you, right? So like what I'm not saying is I want to be lazy and I don't want to do any of the work and I want the algorithms to just literally spoon everybody right into the Dear Gravity bowl and that's it. But I think that it can't be, here's the fans, here's the just the listeners, and we don't like these people because we don't really know them, and we really like these people, and how do we get more people over there? I think I'm becoming more comfortable with the listener relationship, and certainly what can we do to bring people along that journey and turn them into fans? But even more so, like, are there ways that I can just make the listener experience that much better? Or are there pieces of data, are there pieces of information that are really helpful to me to understand that they are being looked at that might cause me to become more comfortable with going after the playlist game? It's not a game, but like, again, with the idea of they may not know the name We Dream of Eden, or they may not know the name Be Still the Earth, but they've listened to so much of my stuff, and at some point it will, in some way, shape, or form, it's gonna show up on their grid. Am I making a more positive outlook on listenership than I probably should be?
It makes me think of discovery mode. That's what it's called, right? Essentially where you're giving up a portion of royalties just for the streams that are generated through radio and discovery mode or autoplay.
Yeah,
and so that to me is, but it's essentially Spotify is owning that transition or that experience, and I think it's a genius on their part, and honestly, it's commissions well spent, in my opinion, if the percentages work out and all that point, because it's using those data points to connect people who are actively or inactively not skipping your music, and they're like, okay, well, they like this. Well, then I'll sneak another one and see if they like that one. And a week later, I'll sneak another one. And then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, okay, they like it. So I think discovery mode is trying to do that very thing, if I understand it correctly, to where how do we use the listener data to give them more of what they want? And it's being considerate, because it's like, we're seeing what you like and we think you might like this. Yeah. Then there's always a chance for nefarious things to happen and all that kind of stuff. But the thing, I think what you're saying is, we don't necessarily own that. We don't have any access to that. Our access is the 30% that we give for the thing, which is, it's not terrible. I think it's okay. But what we don't have is a way to actually, we can't connect to them directly, but we can connect via the commission that they use their data to bring them towards us. Yep. And so that's the extent of the relationship at that point, except for, connect your merch store and all that kind of stuff. But so it made me think of the discovery mode, to where they're thinking about the same thing.
How much do you guys use discovery mode? I don't know if we've ever fully talked about it. Are you dumping a bunch of stuff in? Or are you doing a few tracks? Or I know when it first showed up, Ben, you had something to say about maybe we should try it. But
when it first came out, it was only available to distributors and then kind of labels via distributors. So we tested out a bunch of tracks on each artist. Our distributor that we use on Echoes Blue, on Slow Echo, they're actually really helpful with this. So I've kind of opted in most of our catalog, but they then go through as a distributor and kind of prioritize the ones that are doing well and take off the ones that are not paying out. So it's kind of like, great, they just kind of automate that process. With tracks that are distributed outside of that distributor, you often, especially if it's through like a DIY distro like DistroKid, you obviously have access to that on Spotify for Artists. With those, I've personally kind of tried to do a similar thing, like test out maybe 4 or 5 a month, see if they work. If they do, great. If they don't, I take them off and put different ones in. I feel like if everyone opts in everything all the time, that's when only Spotify win. because, it's the whole thing's, and then, you just basically, everyone loses 30% as a whole. But I think if you as an artist say, hey, in reality, only a few of these are ever going to filter fully to the top. So let's try to find out which ones those are. And those have a really good ROI, as you're referring to, Kirk. And, if it's increased by 300%, but you're only giving 30%, well, that's a really good deal. So let's try to find those ones. Of course, in the knowledge that probably some of the ones that aren't opted in are kind of falling away a little bit. But overall, the deal is not a bad one, I think, if you can find the ones that really get that traction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'll just add one other thing, just kind of rewinding a little bit, which is that what you were saying, Mike, did also remind me of the kind of end of year Spotify Wrapped stuff, because I think that's quite a beautiful opportunity that Spotify do provide for kind of like, maybe, Dear Gravity has been on in the background for people for a very large amount of their year, but they didn't know it was you. But then, hey, you're number 2 on their Wrapped or number 1 on their Wrapped, then it's like, oh wow, I can now find out who this is, and it's linked to your Instagram or whatever. And we've found people with various artist projects I'm involved with exactly through that. They're like, oh, they tag you on Instagram. You're like, oh, this is really cool. And you have like an exchange there. And so I think there are neat opportunities like that. They are too few and far between, I think. I think there could be a lot more that a service like Spotify provides, especially a kind of like opt into a mailing list or something along those lines, or pushing people more actively to something like Instagram. But for sure, it's wherever possible to try to get that personal connection and somehow own that relationship just a little bit more, I think is a good thing. But that's also not to discredit anything you've said, Mike, about, the value
the
value of being of creating music that is responded very positively to by listeners. I think there's absolutely value both for the listeners and also, as you say, for the algorithm to be creating that. And then hopefully over time that kind of does lead people back to you in whatever way, shape or form that is.
Marsh, anything to add?
No, man, I haven't used Discover, so I don't know much about it really.
Yeah, I've used it sparingly. I do a bad job of tracking how much better something does when used on that, and probably need to be better about it, but it's all good.
It's worth checking out. I mean, I would just say it's like essentially you just go down the little list, and if the rise is bigger than 30%, you've essentially broken even. And so it's like, it's basically you're getting new people in your world for free. Yeah. And then anything over that, it's surplus, Yeah. And if it's under, then you just know for the next month, just take it off, And so it's great that it's month to month and it's not a lifetime contract that you're signing, And so that's nice. And you get some real good data of like, oh, wow, this song is, people really like it, And that could inform things that you do with that song. Like you could say, well, maybe I'll make a little video for this song, or I'll make a thing for this song because it's clearly resonating. That's great, And so there's real value from it, I think.
And on the kind of alongside that, almost on the flip side, if there are tracks that you're like, this really represents who I am as an artist, it's an opportunity to kind of push those in front of people more. And I'd especially if you have an artist project which does have a kind of pretty broad stylistic situation, you're like, okay, well, these 5 tracks are what I'm about and what I'm currently about. So you kind of push them out. And so if people click on those, come back to your profile, they'll be pleasantly surprised because it's more of the same type thing.
Marshall, we have some homework.
I guess so.
That's good. Oh, man. Well, I feel like we could keep going on this for a while, but this is a good time to wrap. It is a wonderful thing to be at a place where you're like, man, I wish we could talk about that more, instead of like, oh, I'm really glad that's over, because I felt like we really had to stretch out that conversation. So we'll keep coming back to touch those things, to keep growing, to keep sharpening. But yeah, really, really glad we dug into kind of the first little foray into playlisting and all the benefits and all the situations and everything in between that. So love it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for setting aside the time. The All Ambient Roundtable is a joy in my life, and I'm thrilled that we get to do this together. So thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to the All Ambient podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so you can catch every conversation we have with all these incredible people who share the same passion. I'm looking forward to the next time. I hope that you are too. Can't wait to see you then. And until then, have an incredible day. Here's hoping that this music and the heart behind it makes your day and life that much better. See you next time.